Everyone I've encountered so far uses more or less the same system of rating their books. However, what I've really noticed is that a 5-star rating doesn't always mean the same to everyone. So in today's video, I'm going to explain to you how I rate my books and what those ratings actually mean. So hello and welcome back, my fellow fantasy book lovers. Or if you're new here, hi and welcome. My name is Kathy. I'm a god girl from Belgium who loves to read fantasy books. Now, I personally use Goodreads in combination with my reading journal to actually keep track of what I'm reading and what I think about the books. Now, I only give the stars on Goodreads, and in my reading journal, I actually write a short synopsis of the book that I've read. So whenever I make my videos, I can just simply take my booklet, read what I've written down, and then I remember certain things about books, etc. But of course, with the star giving system, we know that 5 stars is the best and 1 star is the lowest. You're actually not allowed to give 0 stars to a book on Goodreads, and there's also no half-star ratings. And half-star ratings honestly would be a good idea for me personally on Goodreads, because now whenever a book is stuck between 2 ratings, I can't give a half star. I have to put it in the lower and the higher category, and that sometimes is like a little bit like, I don't know. But now let's get into what the actual ratings mean for me personally. If you do it differently, that's perfectly fine. This is just how I do it. So for me, a book that I give 5 stars is a book that I absolutely loved. That if I wouldn't have read that book, my life would have been worse for it. It is the books that I would recommend to almost anyone to read, and it's the books that I will get special editions of if I can, possibly have multiple copies of as well. The books that I just want to reread and recommend to the people around me that also read fantasy books. So those books, in my opinion, are perfection. And just to give you a few examples from my personal collection, there is of course J. Kristoff's Empire of the Vampire and Empire of the Damned, which is the second book, and they are up there on my shelves. You can't really see them right now. Other books that I also gave 5 stars were Neverwhere by Neil Gaiman. I also really love the Crowns of Nyaxia series, When Among Crows, Court of Dragons and Vows, 6 Scorched Roses. So there's a bunch of books that I gave a 5-star rating. Now, something that you have to note is that if I love a series, I sometimes will bump up the entire series to a 5 stars, even if one of the books has a little bit lower rating on its own. Why? Because I feel that series have to be read as a whole most of the time. If there's a book in a series that I feel could have been like just skipped, then I will of course let you know. Up next, we have the 4-star category right below the 5. It is books that I loved, but that were just not there for 5 stars. I might have liked the plot line, but I didn't really love the characters. Or I might have loved the characters, but there wasn't enough plot. Maybe it's a fantasy romance that focuses purely on the romance part and doesn't have enough fantasy, or the other way around. It's a YA book that is a little bit too YA for me, but nonetheless, I really love the story. So these books are near perfection. They're almost there, and still, I will highly recommend these books because for someone, these might be 5 stars. And some of these books over time even evolve to 5 stars whenever it's the start of a duology or of a trilogy, and I end up really loving the second part to it, or even the third part, then the whole of that duology or trilogy might get bumped to a 5 stars, because my frustration sometimes with these books is that it is part of a story and I want the rest as well. And that's why I give them a 4 stars, because I just want that conclusion, that finished whole. So on this list, I have Dragons of Deceit, Can't Spell Treason Without T, Court of Dragons and Crowns, His Majesty's Dragon, The Scarlet Veil, Mountains Made of Glass, These Twisted Bonds, Rootless Vows, Silver in the Bone, A Dowry of Blood, Serpent and the Wings of Night, Bride. So all of these books, you surely heard me rave about them, but the main thing is, for example, Bride by Ailey Hazelwood is a very fun fantasy romance book, but it's not deep enough for me. It's very predictable, it's very light. I love that book, but it's not a book that I would ever give 5 stars. Dragons of Deceit, the first book, had a lot of world building, and even if the story went somewhere, I miss the rest of the story because they really tease to book 2 and book 3 that are coming out soon. So for me, at this point, those are 4-star reads. After that, we have 3-star reads. 3-star reads for me are books that are enjoyable, that I did enjoy my time reading them, but I will not read them again. And they are books that I will only recommend if you're looking for something very specific, and I know that book will fulfill that need. This is not saying that these are bad books. These are the meh, I couldn't care less books. These are books that if I own them, I'm not sure if I would sell them or keep them. They're like this is the in-between phase. Some of the books that are in this category right now is Gideon the Ninth, Fireborn, Court of Dragons and Ashes, A Tempest of Tea, Masters of Death, Filthy Rich Vampire, A Deal with the Elf King, My Roommate is a Vampire. So these are not bad books, don't get me wrong, I still did enjoy them, but there's no point in me rereading them or like physically owning some of them. I do own some of these books, but it feels like I'm missing something in them. So to very simplify it, the 3 stars are the books that I didn't really hate, didn't really like, they're a little bit meh. I don't regret reading them, but I won't pick them up again. Up next, we have the 2-star rating. The 2-star rating is what I use for books that I personally didn't like, but they're not generally bad books. It's not like the books are badly written per se, or there's something wrong with them. It's just not for me. And there's only a few books in this category that I've written down. It is Court of the Vampire Queen, simply too much smut, not enough plot. Then we have A Game of Fate. So this is the Hades and Persephone series. Now, you have A Touch Of and A Game Of. A Touch Of is the book in the perspective of Persephone, and A Game Of is the book in the perspective of Hades. I don't need 2 books that tell me the exact same story from different perspectives. There's 3 books each, and then there's one final conclusion book, and that one is written from the dual perspective. So I just feel like this is milking the cow, the cash cow, for getting more book sales. I personally felt it was very unnecessary. But that, for me, is a 2-star rating book. I didn't dislike the story. I had just read the story from another perspective, so I couldn't care less. This is not specifically bad, but yeah, for me it didn't work. And then we also have The Last Smile in Sunder City. This is more a detective book, and I really didn't connect with the main character. He was very much getting down on himself, being very negative constantly, and I didn't appreciate that, and especially not in the main perspective, the point of view of the book that you're following. For me, it's just not very appealing. Again, you might love this book. I personally didn't. And then finally, we have the 1-star rating. This one I actually have only used once, I think. These are books that are trash, that I would not recommend to anyone, that I would have preferred not seen published, that sometimes they have writing errors in them, they are not well written at all, or they are just too specific and marketed differently. And the only example I have for this is Hunting and Hunting Adeline. Hunting and Hunting Adeline were sold as like this dark romance. It's not a romance. Yeah, I can go on a rant about this. There is a video that I made about these books if you're interested. For me, these were the only books that I recently gave a 1-star rating. And now you might think, is there another category? Yes, there is. There is actually, for me, the DNF category. Did not finish. This is, for me, the worst of the worst that I can give a score to a book. If I don't finish it, it means it was not even good enough to pull my attention until the end. There is only a few books that I've given a DNF for now, and I don't do that very often because usually whenever I get in the book, in the story, I want to know how it ends. So for me, DNFing a book is worse than giving it a 1 or a 2-star rating, because the 1 and the 2-star rating books, at least I finished them. So let's talk about the only book that I've recently DNF'd. Well, there's 2 actually. One of them is The Book Eaters by Sun Yi Dean, and I wasn't in the mindset for reading a dark, doomy, gloomy book at the time. Don't get me wrong, I love dark fantasy, I love vampires. Like, if you see the amount of vampire books that I've read, you know I can handle a little bit. But this book, for some reason, with the draining of the people and then the consuming of the minds and stuff, it was a little bit too much for me. I never got into the flow of the book. I didn't understand the concept they were going for with the book eating, the mind eating, so I just DNF'd it. The other book that I recently DNF'd was Yumi and the Nightmare Painter, and there's one reason for that and one reason alone. It's because there is a narrator voice that is used. So someone is telling the story. I don't like the person telling the story. They come across very arrogant and very entitled, and I just hate it. I really couldn't get into it. I tried so hard. It was my very first Brandon Sanderson book, and everyone was raving on about it. So I was like, okay, I need to try and see if I like this as well. And I was so disappointed. I really, really want to give Sanderson another go, but Yumi and a Nightmare Painter, I think if you would have skipped all of the narrator parts, I would have loved that book. But for now, I DNF'd it. Maybe I'll pick it up another time someday, who knows, but not very soon. And then you might ask yourselves, what are the scores that I usually give to books? Well, most of the books that I've recently read were either 3 stars or 4 stars. There's a very few amount of books that I give 5 stars. They have to be absolutely perfect for that. But there's also very little amount of books that I give 2 stars or 1 star. It actually almost never happens because for me, a book very easily becomes a 3 star if I find it enjoyable. And the thing is, with the books that I pick to read, I always make a selection beforehand. Even before making a purchase for a book, I will look into it. I will decide if it is worth my money or not. And then if I pick it up to read, I want to be in the mood to read it as well. So because I curate the books that I will read, I most of the time end up not being too disappointed, even if something takes a little bit of a different turn than what I expected. This would be totally different, for example, if you were dependent on a local library and you don't really have a lot to choose from fantasy-wise. And I know whenever you start reading books again, it can sometimes be overwhelming, all of the opinions about books. What I tend to do is on Goodreads, I read the synopsis and then I read a very high rating and a very low rating of a book. Because generally I end up being somewhere in between those two. Some of the books have ridiculous reviews and it's very funny, but then I can also see what those people liked about the book and what they disliked about the book. And that often gives me a good direction to go off. So I hope this video helps you if you're looking into starting your own book rating system. I know everyone does it a little bit differently. So feel free to let me know in the comments down below, how do you rate your books? Do you also use a point system from 1 to 5? What do you do with books that you DNF? Do you give them a score or not? And do these scores mean the same thing to you as they do to me? I'm very, very curious to know. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to give it a big thumbs up. And of course, if you haven't already and you'd like to be, feel free to subscribe to my channel. I make new videos every week and I would love to have you for every single one of them. Thank you so much for watching and we'll see you very soon with a new video. Bye!